Check one, check two. It's time for another episode of the Real Pundits podcast, episode 49. It's always amazing that you realize you've listened to way too many other people's podcasts when you start off with an amalgamation of several other different people's intros to a podcast. Just something to think about. If you kind of can guess where my check one, check two thing came from, hit me up and I might have to throw you out some swag of some kind whenever that comes in. Yes, it's blatantly from another podcaster, if you want to call him that, but maybe more. But I'm not going to even get into that. So, as you see, I've been talking by myself, so which means I'm by myself, because by now I would have paused and said for Brandon to come through and say his whole piece and do some scheduling issues. His other job is another job, and sometimes that holds over more than other things, so he's not here, so you guys have to deal with me today, which is going to be a good thing, because that means I can talk about basically anything I want to talk about. Anything geeky, you know what's going to happen. But before that, I want to give a shout out to Dan Brown, and he's from the Character Progression podcast, where he goes through and takes fictional characters and see how they relate to people. And we had a little chat this week, really good stuff. Gave me some insights, some little tips and everything else like that. So I'll give a shout out to him. His podcast info is going to be in the show notes. If you want to give a little help out to him, take a listen. See what he's talking about. Some really cool stuff that he has going on over there. So this week, normally we recorded a little bit earlier than right now, because I'm recording the day of, because last night, instead of doing the podcast, I decided to go see a movie. And anybody who kind of knows me or has been following, you know that Godzilla came out. And that means I watched it already. Now, I'm not going to talk about it in the beginning of the show, because I'm at least going to talk about a couple other things. But when I start talking about Godzilla, I've been thinking about this long and hard. It's one of those things of, there's no way for me to talk about this, A, without spoiling it, and B, without giving my honest opinion. Now, of course, as a critic of sorts, we have to go through and give our honest opinions. But there's some of this that I go, I'm a fanboy of Godzilla. I've been following Godzilla since I was a little one. So there's some things that I know that I'm like, about. But we're going to get into the review of that later on. First, I want to talk about some trailers. There have been a couple of trailers that have come out recently. Only a couple that I want to bring up into major conversation. And the first one of the week, I'm just going to start off with the lower of the two. Not lower, but one that amazed me. Dark Crystal, The Age of Resistance. I don't even know how to start with this. They brought back, it looks like visually from the trailer, they brought back that same level of creepy magic that has happened with the original. They've also did a little action build up. I can see a little, minus an actual explosion, a lot of action sequences with little puppets. So I'm going, it's amazing to see that they've made this change of kind of updating the Dark Crystal, but still keeping it looking the way it originally was. So big props up to the Jim Henson crew that has taken this and brought back life into it. That was some strong paddles to zap that one back away, because I didn't think it could be done again. And I like the fact that it looks, I wouldn't say almost dated, because that style of animation, or not even animation, but it is a style of animation if you look at it, but the puppets and animatronic type stuff, you don't see that much anymore. And it's just one of those things. And of course, we recently had a movie that showcased a large grouping of fake Muppets. So I'm not saying it's not done anymore, but done on the scale the way Dark Crystal was back in the day. So it's just going to be an amazing thing to watch. I'm not watching any more trailers other than the little teaser trailer that came out. There's been too many trailers recently that almost ruin it for me, or the trailers of lies, as I like to call them, because there's scenes that are shot or only used for the trailer, which end up being cutting room floor stuff. They're never in some of these actual movies. I want to be surprised by the things that I see in Dark Crystal. So I'm going to be holding back. So this might be the only time I talk about it until it actually comes out, which is going to be a first for me. Normally I stay on the cusp of knowing every single thing about a movie, an upcoming movie, before it comes out, just because I can be able to talk about it whenever it needs to come up. But for this one, I'm actually going to back away from finding out anything more. Don't want to know the story. I want to walk into this one brand new and fresh. So in my mind, I have to go through and just basically mind wipe myself, because I don't want to ever know about it until it comes back out again. Now, the other trailer that I'm really big up on right now. It's called The Kitchen. It's a DC Vertigo comic that's been adapted for a movie. Now, the grouping of people that are the main stars of this movie, I'm just going to go through them, and then I'm going to have you guess in your own mind, because I know you're not going to say, hey, I know what that is. But you have Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss. Now, just with those first two names alone, the first thing that, if you just said, hey, there's a movie called The Kitchen with Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss. Now, for anybody who's trying to go, Elizabeth Moss, who is that? Who is that? That is the main character from The Handmaid's Tale, which ought to throw you off as far as the setup of this movie. Melissa McCarthy has been mainly known for her silly, over-the-top comedy roles. Same thing with Tiffany Haddish. And once you see the trailer for this, which I also put in the show notes because this is so worthy of watching, this is a mob drama, which is the part that blew me away a little bit, just for the combination of just Tiffany Haddish and Melissa McCarthy. If I thought they were come together for a movie, I knew it would be that level of stupid, silly that I probably wouldn't even be interested in. Watching this trailer, you have the wives, 3 mob wives, taking over for their husbands while they're in jail and trying to pull off the grand takeover, especially as women. So, I'm not saying that a woman couldn't do it before someone hits me up over that whole situation. Just based on how this is done. Now, of course, this is a pseudo-period piece as it happens in 78. Good year. But this is a serious movie, a drama with, like, some violence. And Melissa McCarthy sold me on this character. Now, normally when it comes to anything that's a comic book adaptation, I'm on it. I've already read it. I've been a part of it, and now I'm waiting to judge it. I have to say openly and honestly, I have not read this comic. So now I'm the one who's going to have to do like many other people and run to my local comic book store and go pick up a trade to see what the original content was, so I know what I'm getting into when I get to the movie. Kind of spoiling it myself, but I want to see how well of an adaptation that they're going to do. So we have these three main characters, and the part that I found funny was Elizabeth Moss is playing a very different role than what we've seen her in on countless other TV series. She played the little shy girl who's coming to her own in Made Men, and then she's playing... If you haven't seen Handmaid's Tale, that's just on some next level stuff right there. So she's playing this almost dumb, kind of crass character. So she's adding in comic little justice here and there. And you have Melissa McCarthy and Tiffany Haddish playing the straight women. It's going to be really interesting, but I'm really enjoying it. It reminds me of every single time you would see Robin Williams play a serious role. Back in the day, he was everything that came out of that man's mouth was funny at one time or another. And then he plays a serious role. One of my all-time favorite serious roles that he had was What Dreams May Come. Man, just mind-blowing that the man had so much in him to be able to pull off such serious roles, but is remembered for his comedy. And I think that's the same thing we're going to start learning about Melissa McCarthy, is she has some acting chops. I may not be a fan of her comedy movies. Some of them just go over the top, and her lines of being funny are just way too long. And I feel the same way about Tiffany Haddish. And I've seen a couple of things with her. I know that she can act, because I've seen, it was The Oath. And there was moments where she had to be serious, and I believed that character. It's just sometimes her funny is just not what I need. Great actress, but it's going to be good to see them both come together and play these really serious and somewhat violent characters. So we also, in The Kitchen, one of the co-writers of Straight Outta Compton is actually... This is her directorial debut, Andrea Berloff, and I want to see exactly how well she does, because, you got women in the front, women in the back, and what I mean by that, the actors, directors. So, this is a very female-centric, female-powered movie. So I like to see exactly how they do it and see if we're going to play into the SJW situation, or is this just going to be a movie for movie's sakes, which is what I'm hoping for. No politics in my movies is what I'm really kind of boycotting. And I'm looking forward to that one. You keep an eye on The Kitchen. I think that's going to be probably the one for this year that a lot of people end up talking about. Now, this week, there is a little thing that I do. It's called the movie annuals, where there's like a handful of movies that I go through and watch over and over every year without question. Just, hey, I'm going to go watch this movie. And I'm started up on my annuals. The first couple of months go by. I needed something to kind of cleanse the palate after doing so much Game of Thrones. Now that that's over with, you need to start off with something. And instead of going into another series or picking up something on Netflix, which actually I did, but I'm not binging it. We'll get to that in a second. I started off in my movie annuals. I have a stack of movies that I go through and I watch almost in a certain order. And this week's movie was Inception. And Inception by now is one of those things of, if you haven't seen it, come on. It's a really great movie. But I wanted to bring up to other people, what are your movie annuals? There's these movies that you watch every year or whenever they come on TV. It's almost like Empire Strikes Back, Blazing Saddles. These are movies that I just watch over and over again. And Inception's the only one that I still nitpick and watch and try to tear apart. And if you haven't seen it, you know the ending if you have seen it. But I still rip it apart to try to figure out, did I miss something? And I've seen this movie good 12, 13, 14 times. And I still enjoy it knowing exactly how it's going to go. And I feel every time that I have to do something a little different. This time I watched the movie with subtitles just to see if there's a part of the dialogue that was going to give some information about the very end with the top. Is there anything that I actually missed? And there isn't. I mean, the same movie, but it's still intriguing. So normally back in the old episodes, we used to say, here's your homework. Well, here's something for you guys to talk about. And I'm going to also put it up on Twitter. What are your movie annuals? And what are movies that you just can't be stopped from watching multiple times a year? Because I know some people that do not watch movies more than that one time, maybe twice, and that's it. But everybody has some of those great movies or even bad movies that are annuals. I wanted to bring that up because it was something I was thinking about. So that was pretty much all of my pre-rambling before I get into Godzilla. Now, I'm giving you a chance right now. If you don't want to have the whole spoiler situation going on, this is the time to go, hey, I'm going to stop listening for right now. So I'm going to give the ending right now. So if you want to hit us up and to talk about anything, or hey, hit us up with your movie annuals, hit us up at the mailbag. It's not the mailbag. It's just mailbag at therealpundits.com. Find us on Twitter, The Real Pundits. And give us a piece of your mind, because there's been so many people that end up finding me out and about, and end up talking. It's like, yeah, I was going to talk to you about this because I was listening to your podcast and, oh, you brought up this topic. Well, instead of hitting us up like face to face, hit us up digitally. We can bring up the topic and let other people know. We also have a Facebook group that we also are supposed to be talking about movies on there, but sometimes you can't talk about everything everywhere. So those are the ways to find us. Those are things to do. And if this is the ending of the show for you, this is where I give my obligatory bye. And so that was that. So now on to Godzilla. I'm gonna start with my score first off. For right now, because I'm going to end up seeing this a second time, I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Because I have to use the new scale system that Brandon and I have come up with, because the normal 5 pundies or whatever we were given, doing it to 5 just doesn't work. So out of 10, I'm giving it a 5. And I'm a huge Godzilla fan. And that's where I think my problem was. I'm a Godzilla fan. I love the big monster genre. That is my thing. I love seeing cities get destroyed by huge creatures and being just basically ants in the middle of two people fighting that you just can't really get involved with. The Godzilla movie was decent. Great scenes. There were iconic scenes that they've reimagined and put together. And this picks up almost in perfect timeline with where we were with the last one in 2014. So this has been 4 or 5 years later, and Godzilla is still a thing that we're still dealing with the ramifications of. Now, of course, those in the know, like myself, know that they're tying all of the big monsters together under the Monarch banner. That's this big underground corporation that's going through and doing their science and researching about what they're calling kaiju, or just these big monsters. And our version of it in the Godzilla world, we're calling them Titans. So that's what's bridging us all the way to the upcoming next Godzilla movie, which is going to be Godzilla versus King Kong. That's a known thing. We've been building up for it. This is going to be the throwdown of all throwdowns, we think. It could go a totally different way. But we have this movie that's building up from the last one. And I know some people, because this has like a 50-50 run on it, and when you talk to the people who've watched the movie, some people were saying there wasn't enough Godzilla in the 2014, and some people were saying that there was too much of the human side story. And so this time, I think they heard all those different things and decided that they're going to give a balanced mix of human side and Godzilla side. Now, we got a lot more Godzilla in this one. And just like in some old school Batman movies where you try to have one too many villains inside of the movie, this one is where it lost a couple of points for was you did not have the time to tell the human side, the Godzilla side, and introduce 3 new, as they put them, Titans. That's where we start failing at, because they did a very rushed introduction of a lot of the other Titans. And that was my first, like, oh, you guys really failed. And there was a lot of head shaking involved in while I was watching it, just going, nope, no, you made a mistake there. But the way the fights were done is where they start taking back their points. Beautiful cinematics. I'm talking about some people put in work of taking what was probably on the storyboard and going, we're going to take this one shot that we've seen before in classic Godzilla movies and modernize it. What killed me in this movie was the human side. I felt like that story was just kind of thrown on top of and given way too much focus in this movie. We have Rodan doing Rodan stuff, King Ghidorah doing King Ghidorah stuff, which the build-up for that was really cool, but it happened so fast that we didn't get a chance to figure out exactly why and what's going on. They gave it really quick, and they used the human actors as huge exposition points. Hey, this is happening with this monster. I know something about this. I used to study all this stuff back when I was, and they insert 2014. There was a lot of nods to classic Godzilla movies, which was really beneficial for me as a fanboy of Godzilla to go, I know what that means. I know what that little nod was to. And I thought that was cool, because if you're not big on those, they're going to wash right over your head. There's a huge one with one of the characters is talking about Mothra. And they show a couple of quick pictures of her family, and you notice a set of twins in her family. No, they were not like inch-size twins, but they were a set of twins, and she was talking about how long she's been with the Monarch group and how Mothra is an inspiration and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I see that. I see where that's going. You're giving props to the twins. And if you've never seen the introduction of Mothra in the Godzilla world, you don't know what the twins are. So I'm not spoiling much, but if that just makes you go to the old movies and go watch that. They gave a little bit of a twist of a kind of a, hey, let's fast forward all the lore we know about one character and throw it into another. Now, my spoiler part, and this is the part that I'm going to actually go off about, is something that's happened within Godzilla lore. Now, I'm not saying that this lore is as deep as, with like Brandon and his Game of Thrones lore, that in no way, but there's more content of if you want to battle that. But you have Godzilla has an ultimate form, the end all be all. I can't beat this other big monster. I'm going to do the one thing I know I can do. I'm going to intake a whole lot of radiation, and I become extremely strong. It's the Red Godzilla. Now, for those of us who watch old school Godzilla movies, Godzilla versus the Destroyer. It's Destroyer. And that was the first and major time that we saw Godzilla go into that ultimate form. We go for the Red Godzilla. The red little flames are across the back. And that is the ultimate. Now, why is that important for me to bring up? If we have one more movie where we're going to have this version of Godzilla going on versus King Kong, do we really need to see the ultimate right now? I thought it was a little rushed to try to get that in. It felt like they put that in there just in case we never get to the King Kong versus Godzilla. I'm like, why are we showing off our biggest thing that we can do right now? That bothered me. I was like, man, why are we doing it? Did it look good? Oh, man, they did a really good job. And I want to sit there and say, like, they did really good acting and really good directing. I'm not saying they don't direct when you have a CG scene, but that was all CG. I mean, the monster, the background, there was no actor involved in that, to my knowledge. I mean, if they had a guy mocapping, stomping around, I would love to see that footage. But why bring that up? Why give the ultimate of Godzilla this early, especially when we know we have another movie that's coming up that really kind of just but minus that and the human acting, some of the human acting was just okay. Why are we, this isn't important in the middle of like a whole bunch of titans going through and destroying several different cities. People played things extremely dumb. And you're sitting there shaking your head going, oh, this is so stupid. And it wasn't until I walked out of the theater and I wanted to complain. And I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about on the podcast. I started thinking about not the original King of Monsters and not the original Godzilla with, was it Raymond Burr, the old school Perry Mason one. Those two had a commentary. They were talking about a social issue and just using Godzilla as a way of explaining it. There were deeper movies, but once you start moving forward in some of the Godzilla movies, they were just entertainment. And the characters, even in those, were hokey and silly. And some of them, you're like, you're so dumb. But I started thinking about it, going, as much as I want to complain, because I was wanting a little bit more, this isn't that bad of a movie if you rank it in there. Now, do I think the 2014 was better? I thought they nailed it with that one. This one was good. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. The human acting and the human exposition, that there's a main character that you're following along through the entire thing. That man, it was a multi-tool. He had an answer for everything. He did like 12 different jobs and was connected to so many different things. In the middle of a room full of military people, he wanted to get the tactical way of handling it, which I'm going, right. That character got a little annoying to me after a while. I was just totally like, okay, if he answers how to save the world one more time, I'm going and throwing him in disbelief land. He drugged me down. Some of the other supporting characters I thought were great. My main problem was him. And I really should have looked up the actor's name before I got knee deep into talking about it. And, of course, it's a little late for that now to go through and bring his name up. But if you go through and watch the movie, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Now, do I think, is it worthy of watching? Oh, yeah. I'm going to go see it twice, at bare minimum. That the first time was just for, hey, I'm going to see it early. It's a Godzilla movie. That's something that I do. Heck, I even saw the one with Matthew Broderick, and I really hated that one, because that one did not follow anything that was supposed to be right. But it was a Godzilla movie, so of course I've watched it. And then I also watched the response that Toho came up with. But I'm waiting to see exactly how, not the box office, I'm waiting to see how Toho, the company that owns the rights to Godzilla, how they're going to respond. What do they think of the movie? And you can tell that this was oversaw by them. There were certain things that fit into the exact lore of how it happened, and it was great. But there was a lot of rushing to cram in so much information in one movie. I really think they should have just chose another Titan and left it Godzilla versus that one Titan. Yes, you may not get like 6 or 7 movies out of it as far as people's interest, but I think with having 5 years to go through and create this movie, I was expecting a little bit more fine-tuning. The script, I would love to see if this was just the second draft. I wasn't saying this is the first draft. This is second, but I don't think this should have been the final draft. That's the it in a nutshell. It was more of me complaining about all the negatives. Some of the positives are the scenes. There's a scene where Ghidorah is truly charging up, and it takes up the entire screen. I mean, from one corner to another corner is just visual spectacle, and that's great. There's a couple of scenes where I like to call it my Mortal Kombat fight moment, where you have Godzilla on one side, and Ghidorah on the other, and they are just staring at each other. All I needed to hear was somebody go, fight, and it would have fit perfectly. I'm waiting to see that become a meme on the internet sometime soon, because it's coming. There were some great visuals. Humans, like always, and just as a reminder in this story, humans are the reason why bad things are happening, and the humans are the reason why this movie is not getting a higher score. I want to give it a 6. Maybe after the second time I watch it this weekend, I might bump it up to a 6. Right now, it's a 5 because it sits right there in the middle. It's great in some aspects and bad in some others, and it felt so rushed. And I'm not saying that I wanted the slow burn of the 2014, but I enjoyed the slow burn of 2014. And I think that if you're going to introduce some of these other Titans, you really ought to give them time. The Mothra, one of my other favorite characters, almost more than Godzilla, was shown off great. The scenes were great. Trailers ruined one of them. But majority of the Mothra scenes were ruined by trailers, which is where hey, I'm not going to do like the second and third and fourth version of the trailer. I actually stopped watching trailers for Godzilla because I got tired of seeing too much. You basically saw all the major Mothra scenes if you've seen any of the current trailers, because they show all the great grandeur scenes. They did a great job, but did not explain, minus the little bit of exposition, what's really going on. Why do that? You have 5 years in between these movies. Tighten it up, or reduce trying to add in everybody. Now, we have King Kong versus Godzilla coming up. That is a known thing that it's been building up, and I'm hoping it turns into almost a buddy Titan film where they're going around beating up on stuff. Of course, you'll start off with, hey, I don't like you, you don't like me, we're going to fight for a second, but then there's going to be something that shows up that makes them both go, hey, we got to stop that. Where, in my mind, that was the moment where they should have had King Ghidorah show up. Let this first one have been about just Rodan, and I think the Rodan scene could have been explained more of where Rodan was found, why it does what it does, and how it destroys so many things. Now, they kept it pretty tame as far as, because my version of it, there would have been a lot more visceral destruction with Rodan, one of my other favorites. They kind of just quickly blurred over Rodan, and that's that. It's kind of sad. They also showed a couple of other new Titans that I've never seen before, which I'm like, okay, I'll let that be. I can accept that. Woolly Mammoth Titan, I was kind of impressed by. But this was a global event, and they did a good job, and it was an interactive movie. It was a fun summer, just let your mind go and accept the silliness of this movie and enjoy Godzilla stomping around, which is where I still feel bad about giving it a 5 out of 10. So that's what I said. Right now, my official vote on it, I've kind of rambled on about this for a while. I'm kind of feeling like Brandon right now. I'm going to give it a 5. It's going to probably be at the end of it all of seeing it a second time, maybe a 6. It's definitely not in 7 category just for humans. Humans mess up things, especially in a kaiju or Titan movie. But that's where I'm sitting at. So this weekend, if you have the time, by all means, go see it. It's just not going to be perfect, but if you're a hardcore Godzilla fan like I am, there's so much enjoyment for you in that. If you're not a Godzilla fan, this just may be another popcorn movie, which there's nothing wrong with that. Go through, watch it, and let me know what you think about it. And the next time we get back on the mic, or if I get back on the mic, we're going to be going through are classics. We're going to start that whole situation up. We're going to get into some black and white films, and I can't even say which one because I'm hoping that next week Brandon will be involved and we'll be able to talk about some things together. But until that time, be good to one another. I'm out. Bye.